West of the Rockies, John in Foster, Oregon. It's your turn. John, go ahead.
Oh, George, you beautiful man. Hello there. And Mr. Griffin. Okay, I think I've got a solution. All right, it doesn't involve a lot of complicated stuff. It involves a very simple thing called the lottery, and it involves people. Now, we have to have people, Mr. Griffith. We can't do it without the population having some idea of what it is to have an impact on what legislation is and what it does to their lives every day. We know that we're dealing with a whole bunch of uneducated people, right?
Yes, and some very well-educated people, which generally those are the worst problem.
Yeah, I know. Well, I was educated by Grandpa laying up against the hot radiator until 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. So, and I'm a Vietnam vet, and I'm 100% disabled without a lot of time to think. Okay, so here it is. Most of anything you try to get the people behind, you always got some objection. So you have to have something that's as simple as a cartoon, or they're not going to understand it. Will you agree with that?
Well, I think that to get most people to understand something, it has to be simple, yes.
Okay.
But let me just add that it's not always necessary to get most people to understand something in order to bring about profound change.
Well, can you agree that you have to get most of the people, enough people to get a profound change, that they have to reach a comfort zone, and that most of the people in our country don't have a prayer of reaching that comfort zone because their spirit is they're so full of apathy?
Well, I agree with that, and I think I generally agree with where you're going with this. Okay. But I just want to say that the great motions of history are always led by a very small group of people, usually less than 3%, and the rest just follow along.
Right.
And I think if we're looking at any realistic plan for a change in the future, we have to focus on that 3% or that 2%, the real leadership portion of society, and not get too hung up about getting the rest of the masses to comprehend, to understand, and so forth. It's a leadership issue.
Yes, that's right. I understand. And a leadership issue, in order to get a movement going, it has to be the old proverbial snowball going down the hill.
Yes, yes.
It's not something that can be stopped.
Right.
Now, what we've got with the lottery in all the states, and I know the lottery brings up a nasty connotation in most people's minds, but in essence, what we have is a lottery that was voted on in every state by the people in that state. In Oregon, where I'm at, it happened to be voted on in 1985, supposedly to relieve property taxes and provide funding for the schools. Okay, now, what it ends up being is a volunteer tax system where a whole lot of people put in a little bit of money on a gamble that maybe they will get a large sum of money, as opposed to a very good chance of winning a meaningful sum of money in their lives. Okay, what it ends up being is like a voluntary tax. One person wins a whole big bunch. The Fed and the state come in. They get 2/3 or more, and then everybody else that tried, they get nothing. Now, if instead of one big prize, contrary to the blather that they put out where, oh, well, they only start paying off until when the lottery gets big do people start playing, no. I did a lot of basically innocent research, and more people would play if instead of one big lottery, you have got a winning six-digit number for every 100,000 as opposed to a winning six-digit number for 100 million going to one person. You see where I'm going with this? I'm talking about lifting people's spirits. I'm talking about everybody knowing somebody else that got something, the money being spent locally. I'm talking about people getting off of the bottom third of their gas tank and on the top fifth of their gas tank. I'm talking about them feeling that they have done something together without actually having to make some political statement. It's a form of continuity without actually getting them involved in anything more than what appears to be a very simple thing.
Maybe that's one thing they can do in addition to getting rid of the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, my question, John, is that I don't want to argue with what you're saying because it makes a lot of sense, but how is that going to get all of these criminals out of the Federal Reserve System? How is that going to get all of the predator class out of government? How is that going to change our country?
Yeah, well, that's something that has to be done first, don't you think, Ed?
Well, it certainly has to be done, and by raising revenue through a lottery system, as much merit as that may have, it's merely focusing on a different way to raise revenue without focusing on any changes in the system.
When the big boys are told, like Bank America, buy Merrill Lynch, do this, do that, why do they do this? And also, why do they buy Countrywide?
Oh, well, I'm not privy to the decision process for that, but I do know that certain banking groups are favored, and there's competition between them. And you find a firm like Goldman Sachs, for example, that would use its economic clout to destroy one of its competitors. And I don't really know what goes on behind the scenes, but I do know that the ones that are pushed out of existence and gobbled up are usually the ones that are not as favored as the ones who wind up holding all the chips afterward.
Good point. Good point. John, thanks for your call. Let's take a few more before the break, and then we'll be back with final phone calls in just a moment. Steve in Greenburgh, Pennsylvania, east of the Rockies. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, George.
Thanks for calling. Go ahead.
I'd like to say it takes a great deal of courage to stand up to these people, and I commend Edward for his courage on the subject. I'd also like to say that it takes a lot for a host to have a guest like Edward. And, I think one of the things that people overlook is that we're letting a very few group of people decide for a whole species what our inevitable future will become. And if we don't understand that we have all the control, all we have to do is stop playing their war games. They won't be able to make all the financial gain from country to country and shift all their bank money around if we just lay down our guns and stop killing each other. We're looking at 6.7 billion people against a couple thousand. I mean, we could jail them in a peaceful manner and not even have to deal with this situation anymore. But people are so afraid and so ignorant that they're in fear, and then they react with hostility, and they play right into the cards of the bankers. I'm just going to hang up and listen.
Okay.
Yes, Steve, I certainly agree with that appraisal. One of the problems we have is that people are led by their political leaders and their media leaders, and they are more or less led as to what to think, what to fear, what to be uncertain about. And the bottom line is that something I mentioned a moment ago is that the masses always follow the leaders. So our task, before we can bring about any real substantive change, is to become leaders, to replace the leaders that we now have. And then the masses will follow. Then they won't be fearful. Then they'll know clearly what they have to do. But until the leaders themselves are clear, then the great majority of the people will be totally confused, and they'll be motionless. They'll be frozen like a dead spider in a web. They just will be motionless. They don't know what to do.
Okay, next up we go to Nashville, Tennessee, but we will do that at the top of the hour. Ed, again, so many people calling for you, and check your website during the break. I bet you'll find that you're getting more hits than you can imagine.
Okay, I'm not sure I know how to do that. I'll have to learn.
Got to get you into the computer world, but you're getting there.
Yes, I hope.
All right, stay with us. G. Edward Griffin, our guest, his special book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. If you need to email me, that's George at coasttocoastam.com. I read them all, answer as many as I can, except spam.